In the heart of a noisy, hurried city, where no one has time for anyone, and almost everyone is too busy to notice a simple glance, a young woman named Lara lived between modest dreams and daily struggles. At 29 years old, and with a degree in fine arts that she had never used professionally, she supported herself by selling flowers on the corner of a busy street. There was no glamour in her routine, but there was dignity, and there was something even rarer: true empathy. It was on a rainy October afternoon that Lara met Caio. He was sitting in front of the entrance to an old library, wearing a worn overcoat and staring at a water-stained notebook. He didn't beg for money, didn't talk to anyone, just drew with a rare intensity. Lara, who was carrying her flowers wrapped in plastic to protect them from the rain, stopped for a moment. Something about that man touched her. It wasn't pity, it was connection, as if she had seen a piece of herself there. The next day she brought him a hot coffee, in the other a cheese bread and a smile. Within a few days her routine began to include that silent man who barely spoke, but who began to offer her drawings as a thank you. Drawings so beautiful that Lara swore she had never seen anything so vivid. One of them showed a girl with flowers in her hair looking at the horizon, and she understood that it was about her, but she still didn't know why. Caio, as he introduced himself only in the third week, said that he had lost everything. He spoke little, always choosing his words carefully. He never asked for anything. There was an elegance in his manner that clashed with his patched clothes and the smell of rain and weather. Lara, without realizing it, began to change her route to spend more time with him. Even without knowing his entire story, she trusted him, not logically, but with her soul. Meanwhile, Lara was facing problems at home. Her fiancé Pedro, with whom she had been for 3 years, had begun to seem distant, harsh, indifferent. The wedding scheduled for 2 months later seemed more like an agreement than a choice. Lara's mother insisted that Pedro was a good choice, a promising lawyer from a traditional family. But deep down, Lara felt something different. She felt like she was sinking into a soulless relationship. It was on a Friday afternoon that everything fell apart. Lara arrived early at the apartment she shared with Pedro and found him with another woman. Not just any woman, her best friend from childhood. The betrayal, besides being obvious, was cruel. They didn't even bother to hide it. Pedro simply said that Lara was too good for him and that she deserved someone better, as if that would erase the pain of being stabbed in the back. Lara left crying, her eyes burning with anger and shame. She walked aimlessly to the library. Caio was still there. When he saw her, he stood up immediately, even though he didn't understand anything. Lara, without knowing why, sat down next to him and broke down. She told him everything: the betrayal, the humiliation, the fear for the future. Caio didn't say anything. He just listened to her, and after a few minutes, with a firm and calm voice, she said, "You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to be true to who you are." That night, Lara slept at her aunt's house, and the next day she returned to the square with a crazy idea in her head. She needed a plan. She needed a response that was up to the task, and that's when she proposed something unexpected. She asked Caio to pretend to be her fiancé for a while. Not just any fiancé, but someone worthy of her new story. It was to save face, to show her family and guests that she had moved on. Caio hesitated for a few seconds, but accepted, not out of pity, but for her, and because deep down, there was something in him that was also beginning to blossom. In the days that followed, Caio became a constant presence. Lara took him to meet her grandmother, her uncles, and even some co-workers. Everyone found his quiet manner, his mysterious air, strange, but they also noticed something rare. Lara was smiling like she hadn't smiled in a long time. With Pedro, she had learned to keep quiet. With Caio, she was rediscovering her own voice. What no one knew, not even Lara, was that Caio was keeping a secret. He was not just a homeless man. In fact, he was the son of one of the most renowned artists in the country, heir to a considerable fortune, and the author of paintings that sold for millions in international galleries. But after the tragic death of his father and a forgery scandal involving a former business partner, Caio decided to disappear. He created a new identity and began to live as an invisible person, seeking to understand people without the veil of money or fame. And it was in this disguise that he met Lara, the only one who truly saw him. In the days leading up to the symbolic wedding that Lara had promised to perform just to save appearances, what began as a performance became something deeper. The walks with Caio through the streets of the neighborhood, the dinners improvised with Italian bread and mint tea, the conversations about childhood, fear and dreams, everything seemed light, genuine, as if she was finally breathing after years of being submerged. The original plan was simple, to hold a small event just for family and close friends, to say that she had recently met Caio and that they had decided to get married because, when it's real, you feel it. It sounded cliché, but it fit perfectly with the narrative that Lara wanted to sell to others, and little by little to herself. During the wedding rehearsal, Lara's mother, Donna Dalva, was suspicious. She was the type of person who could smell trouble from miles away, and Caio, with his restrained gestures and introspective air, didn't convince her. "There's something there," she would say quietly to her older sister. But Lara, as firm as ever, simply replied, "Mum, for the first time I chose someone who sees who I am, and not what they expect me to be." The day before the ceremony, while they were sitting under a huge tree in a nearly empty park, Lara asked Caio why he never talked about the past. He smiled with his eyes downcast and replied, "Because there are things that, if said before the right time, can lose their value." That enigmatic and poetic phrase reverberated in her mind throughout the night. The wedding day arrived. Lara wore a simple but beautiful dress, made by a seamstress who was a family friend, with discreet lace on the shoulders and a short veil that looked more like a flower tied in her hair than something ceremonial. Caio wore a borrowed suit that fit him perfectly. Anyone who saw him there, arm in arm with her, would never have imagined that until a few days ago he had been sleeping on a park bench. The ceremony took place in an open garden, with yellow lights hanging from wires between the trees, and a soft soundtrack in the background. The guests watched in silence as Lara and Caio exchanged simple but deeply authentic vows. When Caio held her hands and said that she was the first person to truly see him, even when he couldn't see himself, most people's eyes filled with tears. But it was the next moment that the unexpected happened. A tall man with grey hair and an impeccable suit stood up from among the guests and walked to the altar. With a firm but emotional voice, he looked at Caio and said, "You still know how to surprise me, son." The silence was immediate. Lara, not understanding, looked at Caio, and then everything fell apart, or rather everything was revealed. That man was Leonardo Bittencourt, an art collector known in the country's cultural circles. And Caio, in fact, was Daniel Bittencourt, a renowned painter who had disappeared years before after being involved in a scandal that was never proven true. The name was fake. The story was too. But the feelings, those were real. Lara was paralyzed, not because of the lie, but because of the fear that all of that had not been true. She walked away, confused, gasping for air. Caio followed her, trying to explain. He said he chose her precisely because she treated him like someone, even though she didn't know anything. That the truth scared him, because he had already been loved because of her, but never in spite of her. The guests, confused, murmured among themselves. Donna Dalva watched everything in silence, feeling a strange pride in her daughter for having seen what no one else could. And it was there, in that moment of chaos, that Lara made a decision. She returned to the altar, looked at the guests and said, "Today I am not marrying a name, an inheritance, or a status. I am choosing someone who, even though he was hurt, gave me the purest pieces of his heart. And if that is not love, I don't know what is." The applause came spontaneously, and more than that, respect. In the days following the symbolic wedding, Caio's name, or rather Daniel Bittencourt's, returned to the news, not as a scandal, but as a mystery that had been sensitively unraveled. Tabloid newspapers tried to pull headlines from the past, but they soon fell silent in the face of Lara's calm and firm stance, which did not allow the story to become a spectacle. "It's not about fortune or escape, it's about healing," she said in an interview with a local channel, which went viral for the simplicity of her words and the intensity of her gaze. Daniel had distanced himself from the art world after his mother's death, when a painting that had disappeared from his family's gallery was used to accuse him of theft and blackmail. It was all masterminded by a jealous former assistant, but the pain of the public accusations swallowed him up before the truth could emerge. He disappeared. He abandoned his canvases, his palettes, his last name. He became Caio. He became a nobody. And it was as a nobody that he found love. A love that required no resume or proof. A love that didn't question him about his baggage, but offered him a space to land. Lara, who had spent much of her life trying to meet other people's expectations, was now building a story where the truth had a place, even when it hurt, even when it was imperfect. The reunion with her father was difficult, but necessary. Leonardo, a businessman who had always treated art as an investment, had to relearn the meaning of the word son. They met at the family's old country house, and Daniel, instead of discussing the past, invited him to paint. Not on canvas, but on a worn wall of the back shed where they had played as children. There the two allowed themselves the silence that heals, the gesture that reconciles without words. Lara, in turn, decided to go back to teaching, but this time in a volunteer creative writing project with women living in shelters. She wanted other people, like her and Daniel, to learn that their own story can be rewritten, that no one needs to accept being defined by the worst chapter of their life. And so the two began a new life, simple but true, without the spotlight, without dinners with cutlery that looked like surgical instruments. They now lived in a small house but with wide windows. Daniel set up an improvised studio in the backyard, where he began to paint again, not for exhibitions, but for his heart. Lara wrote letters to people she had never met, as a form of therapy and connection with the world. Some of these letters ended up being published anonymously on a collective blog and gained loyal readers. One day, while walking through an art fair in the city center, Lara came across a woman with a sad look on her face, selling handmade notebooks. She stopped, bought one, and struck up a conversation. In less than 15 minutes, she was there, listening to a deep outburst about loss, new beginnings, and longing. At the end of the conversation, the woman asked, "Why did you listen to me?" And Lara, with the calm of someone who has carried the world on her shoulders, replied, "Because someone also listened to me one day, when all I wanted was to disappear." It was then that she realized that the love she shared with Daniel was not just about the two of them. It was about multiplying this space for listening, this invisible embrace that saves without making noise. It was about creating a new legacy, not of money or fame, but of humanity, presence, and affection. Months passed, and unexpectedly, some of Lara's anonymous letters ended up in the hands of an independent publisher who was enchanted by the strength and vulnerability of those texts. She sent a timid email with the proposal to gather the letters into a small book. Lara hesitated. She was afraid of exposure. But Daniel, with that look of someone who has seen the worst and decided to continue, simply said, "The right words find those who need them. Let go." And she did. The book came out with the title, "Things I Would Write to Myself If I Had the Courage." It wasn't a bestseller, but it was a hit in the hearts of many people. It gained space in community libraries, reading clubs in prisons, and discussion groups in public schools. Each time a letter was read aloud by someone who had never met Lara, a wound was gently touched, as if to say, "I've been there too. And I survived." Daniel, now more at ease with his identity, decided to sign his new paintings simply as D. He said it was a way of reminding himself that art doesn't have to be about fame, but about expression. Some of his works began to circulate among young collectors who cared more about history than signature. His art was raw, alive, marked by lines that looked like scars, but beautiful scars like those that tell of a battle won. One day, while walking together in a park, they stopped in front of a mural painted by local artists. Lara leaned her head on his shoulder and said, "I never imagined that such deep pain would bring me so close to my essence." Daniel squeezed her hand and replied, "Maybe that's what life does to us. It breaks everything that isn't real, so that what is true can flourish." And so it was, between simple mornings, afternoons with the smell of paint and nights when they exchanged letters even while sleeping in the same bed, that they began to write this new life. A life that didn't start out perfect, but became precious because it was built with truth, with listening, with acceptance. Today, those who look at them might still see just an ordinary couple, but those who know the story behind their smiles understand that there is a discrete miracle there. Two human beings who survived the weight of the world and chose not to hide. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you. But not with that cold formality that we hear at the end of any video. I want to thank you as if you were receiving a dear guest in your living room, as if you had shared an intimate story with someone who understands. If you saw yourself in any part of this story, if you cried, if you smiled or simply stopped to think about something that you had buried deep down, then this story is also yours, and it would be amazing to hear a little bit of it. Write in the comments what touched you the most, or tell us a story of a new beginning, of healing, of love that appeared when you least expected it. And if you want to continue receiving stories like this, stories that don't have a ready-made happy ending, but have a truly new beginning, subscribe to the channel. Here, each video is made with soul, with listening, with the intention of reminding you that you are not alone. This space is ours and you are part of it. Now tell me, what did this story awaken in you?